The Vampire King's hands had steadied battlefields, signed death warrants without a tremor, held the weight of a crown for 3 centuries, yet they shook now as his lips brushed her knuckles. "May I take you to dinner?" Silvanus Yveraux asked. And Amara Lawson watched his silver-white hair catch the gallery's low lighting, watched his pale throat work as he swallowed, watched the tiniest fracture appear in that perfectly composed mask. She'd noticed him 20 minutes ago, standing before a painting of the moon, utterly motionless in a way that set him apart from every other patron, too still, too perfect. When he'd turned and those crimson eyes had found hers across the room, her heart had stuttered and restarted with a new rhythm entirely. "You don't even know my name," she said softly. "Amara." Her name was velvet and smoke in his mouth. "You volunteer at the Children's Hospital on Tuesdays. You take your coffee black. You come here every Friday evening because art makes you feel less alone in a city that swallows people whole." A thrill of fear and fascination tangled in her chest. That's either romantic or terrifying, perhaps both. The corner of his mouth lifted, but his thumb traced an unconscious circle against her hand. Still holding it, still trembling. "I've been trying to find the courage to approach you for 6 weeks. I am not a man who lacks courage, typically, but you lack it now?" Something ancient and wounded flickered behind his eyes. Profoundly, Amara studied him. The expensive black suit that looked tailored in another century. The aristocratic features that belonged on currency or classical sculpture. The preternatural beauty that should have felt manufactured but instead felt dangerous, wild, barely contained beneath layers of careful civility. "You're him," she breathed, "the one from the stories, the Vampire King." He went impossibly more still. "The stories are rarely kind. They say you're ruthless, that you've ruled the East Coast territories since before the Revolutionary War, that other vampires fear even speaking your name carelessly." She tilted her head. "But they also say you've never broken a treaty, never harmed a human without cause, and that you enforce laws protecting mortals in your domain more strictly than any human government manages. You've researched vampires. I've researched you. Since the 3rd Friday when I realized you were watching me." She smiled at his expression. "You're not the only one who can be observant, Your Majesty." "Silvanus," he corrected quietly. "Please, when you say it, I would hear my name, not my title." The vulnerability in that request melted something in her chest. This creature who could probably kill everyone in the gallery without breaking a sweat was asking, nearly begging, for the simple intimacy of his own name from her lips. "Silvanus," she said, testing it, watching his eyes close briefly as if savoring the sound. "I'd love to have dinner with you." His hand steadied instantly, gripping hers with sudden firmness. "Tomorrow evening, I'll send a car at 7. Why not tonight? Because I need time to ensure your safety." The words came sharp and fast, then he seemed to catch himself. "I apologize." That sounded controlling, it sounded honest. Amara squeezed his fingers. "What are you afraid of, Silvanus?" He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw centuries of war and loss and careful survival looking back. "That wanting you will get you killed," he said finally. "It has before." Then he released her hand, inclined his head with old-world grace and walked away before she could ask what he meant. The car that arrived at 6:55 the next evening was a midnight blue Bentley with a driver who opened the door with practiced efficiency. Amara had agonized over what to wear. What did one wear to dinner with a vampire king? Before settling on a deep burgundy dress that made her brown skin glow and her dark curls look intentionally romantic rather than humidity-frazzled. The restaurant wasn't a restaurant. The car pulled up to a mansion in the historic district, all iron gates and gas lamps and climbing ivy that looked picturesque but probably hid security cameras. The driver escorted her to the door, which opened before she could knock. Silvanus stood in the entrance, and Amara's breath caught. He wore all black again, but this was different: a silk shirt open at the collar, tailored trousers, an understated elegance that somehow emphasized rather than concealed the predator beneath. His white hair was pulled back loosely. His red eyes tracked her face with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she'd never experienced. "You're staring," she said. "Forgive me, you're beautiful." He offered his arm. "Please come in." The mansion's interior was exactly what she'd imagined: gothic and luxurious, all dark wood and crimson fabrics and artwork that was probably priceless. He led her through halls that whispered of age and power, finally arriving at a dining room lit entirely by candles. A table was set for 2, crystal and silver and china that looked antique. No servants, she noticed, just the 2 of them. "You cooked?" she asked as he pulled out her chair. "I did." He moved to his own seat with that unnatural grace. "It's been decades since I've prepared food, but I remember how. I wanted privacy tonight. No staff, no witnesses. Should that concern me? No." His voice was firm. "You're safe with me, Amara. You will always be safe with me. I meant that I wanted you to feel free to speak candidly, to ask questions without worrying about who might overhear." The first course appeared from a covered dish already on the table, a delicate soup that smelled of herbs and cream. Silvanus didn't take any for himself. You can't eat, Amara realized. I can. It provides no sustenance, but I can still taste, still enjoy the ritual of it. He ladled soup into his own bowl anyway. I won't make you dine while I simply watch. That would be unsettling. This is surreal. She picked up her spoon. Yesterday I was a pediatric nurse living in a studio apartment, worried about rent. Tonight I'm having dinner with vampire royalty. Yesterday you were a woman who brings light into dying children's lives and spends her free time at art galleries because beauty matters to you even when you're exhausted. Silvanus met her eyes. Tonight you're still that woman. I'm the only thing that's changed, and I'm not so different. Just older, lonelier. Why me? Amara asked. You could have anyone. I don't want anyone. I want you. He said it simply as if it were obvious. I've watched you comfort grieving parents. I've watched you laugh with your coworkers even on the hardest days. I've watched you stand in front of paintings and let yourself feel things openly in a world that teaches people to hide. You're kind without being weak. You're soft without being fragile. And when you smile, it feels like sunlight, which I haven't seen in 300 years. Her throat tightened. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm old-fashioned. Courtship was different in my time. More deliberate, more honest about intention. And what are your intentions? Silvanus set down his spoon carefully. To know you. To court you properly if you'll allow it. To see if what I feel might be returned. And if it is. He paused, something fierce crossing his features. To protect you with everything I have while we discover what we might become together. You keep mentioning protection. Amara leaned forward. Last night you said wanting me could get me killed. What happened, Silvanus? His jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, each word precisely controlled. 70 years ago I courted a human woman, Margaret. She was a teacher. Smart, brave, beautiful. I was careful. I kept our relationship private. I met her in secret. I told no one in my court. His fingers curled into a fist on the table. My enemies discovered her anyway. They watched us. They identified her family, her friends, everyone she loved, and then they burned her entire apartment building to the ground. 23 people died. Margaret, her sister, her nephew, neighbors who'd simply had the misfortune of living near someone I cared for. Oh God, Amara's hand covered her mouth. I hunted them down. It took 5 years, but I found every vampire involved and I killed them. His voice was empty of emotion now, which somehow made it worse. But it didn't bring them back. It didn't change the fact that my affection was what marked her for death. And you've been alone since then. It seemed safer for everyone. He finally looked at her again. But then I saw you, and I was selfish. I haven't wanted anything beyond duty and survival in 7 decades, and suddenly I wanted with a ferocity that terrified me. So I've been preparing how? Security routes, safe houses. I've had my most trusted people investigating every potential threat for 6 weeks. I've called in favors and made alliances to ensure that anyone who might consider using you against me knows the cost would be absolute annihilation. His red eyes blazed. I will not lose you the way I lost her. I won't allow history to repeat. Amara processed this. The obsessive watching suddenly made sense. The nervousness made sense. This wasn't a man afraid of rejection. This was a man afraid of becoming her death sentence. You're shaking again, she said gently. He looked at his hand in surprise, then closed it. I apologize. Don't. She reached across the table and covered his fist with both her hands. Silvanus, look at me. He did reluctantly. I'm not afraid, she said. I'm careful, not reckless. If there are precautions we should take, I'll take them. If there are risks, we'll manage them together. But I'm not going to let fear stop us from seeing where this goes. She smiled. I fell for you on the second Friday when you stood in front of that Monet for 40 minutes just because you knew I'd be there. When you could have approached me but didn't, because you were still working up the courage. That kind of restraint from someone as powerful as you? That's not weakness, that's care. Something in his expression cracked. You fell for me completely. She felt her cheeks warm. I went home and researched vampire courtship traditions. I learned that when a vampire of your age and status asks someone to dinner, it's not casual, it's a formal declaration of intent. So yes, I know what this is. And I'm here anyway. Silvanus turned his hand over beneath hers, threading their fingers together. I will keep you safe, Amara. I swear it on my crown and my blood. I know you will. They ate, or she ate, while he kept her company, and they talked. He told her about the world before electricity, about watching empires rise and fall, about the strange loneliness of immortality. She told him about growing up with a single mother who'd worked 3 jobs, about choosing nursing because she wanted to matter, about the small joys that kept her going. The conversation flowed like water, easy and natural. Hours passed. Somewhere around midnight over dessert she couldn't finish. He asked about her favorite childhood memory. She told him about fireflies and summer nights. He described the same phenomenon in the 1700s, and she realized they'd both been enchanted by the same small magic just centuries apart. I should let you sleep, Silvanus said finally, regretfully. You have work tomorrow. Unfortunately, she didn't want to leave. This bubble of candlelight and connection felt too precious to break. He walked her to the door, called for his driver. On the threshold he took her hand again and raised it to his lips, steadier now, though she could still see the care in every movement. May I see you again? He asked. Yes. Obviously yes. Friday? Dinner again? Perfect. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face from beautiful to devastating. Thank you, Amara, for taking a chance on someone who's forgotten how to be anything but careful. Thank you for being brave enough to be nervous, she returned. She didn't see the tiny device attached beneath the doorframe as she left. Didn't notice the way Silvanus's expression went cold and deadly the moment her car pulled away. But he saw it. Saw and recognized the make, the signature, the message. Someone had bugged his home. Someone had listened to every word. And that someone wanted him to know they had. Silvanus pulled the device free and crushed it between his fingers. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. Theron, we have a problem. His second-in-command appeared within minutes, materializing from shadow with the ease of an old vampire. Theron was tall and scarred, with the same white hair and red eyes but a harder edge, a military precision. Talk, Theron said. Silvanus handed him the crushed bug. Someone listened to everything. They know about Amara now. They know I'm courting her. Theron swore viciously. Kane, that's my suspicion. Silvanus's voice was ice. He's the only one arrogant enough to announce himself this way. The only one with a grudge old enough to mirror tactics from 70 years ago. You killed his brother for the Margaret massacre. I killed his brother because his brother slaughtered 23 innocent people. Silvanus turned toward the window, looking out at the city he'd ruled for centuries. Kane's been in hiding since then, building power, waiting. He wants revenge, and he's decided to take it the same way his brother did, by making me watch someone I love die. Then we move the girl. Hide her. No. The word came out sharp. That's what he'll expect. That's what I did before. And it failed. Margaret died anyway because I tried to hide her instead of eliminating the threat. Silvanus turned back to Theron. This time we do it differently. This time I end Kane before he can touch her. You're using her as bait. I'm refusing to let fear dictate my actions. There's a difference. Silvanus's hands clenched. I will continue courting Amara exactly as planned. Public dinners, visible dates. I want Kane to think I'm being reckless, that I'm repeating old patterns. Meanwhile, you're going to hunt him. We've been hunting him for decades. He's good at hiding. He won't be hiding anymore. Not now that he's made his move. He'll be watching us, which means he'll be exposed. Find him, Theron. Find him and bring me his location. I want this finished before our second date. Theron studied his king. You care about this one. I love her. The admission came quiet but certain. I didn't expect it to happen so fast, but it's true. I love her, and I will not allow Kane to turn that love into her death. Not this time. Then I'll find him. Take whoever you need. Call in every favor. I want the entire network mobilized. Theron nodded and vanished back into shadow. Silvanus stood alone in his mansion, hands steady now that he had a purpose beyond fear. He would not hide Amara. He would not run. He would not repeat the mistakes of his past. This time he would eliminate the threat entirely. And then, perhaps, he could court her without the weight of terror pressing down on every moment. The week crawled by. Amara texted him daily small messages that made his ancient heart ache. Photos of her lunch, questions about whether vampires could swim, random observations about her patients that she thought he'd find interesting. He responded to everyone, let himself be human with her in a way he hadn't been in decades. Meanwhile, Theron worked. The vampire underground buzzed with activity as Silvanus's people called in decades of favors, activated networks that had been dormant, and systematically eliminated every hiding place Kane might use. On Wednesday they got a lead, a warehouse in Baltimore where Kane had been spotted. On Thursday Theron called. We have him. Not just him, his entire operation. He's been building an army, Silvanus. 20 vampires, all loyal to him, all ready to move against you. Location sending it now. But this is going to be war. You can't do this alone. I don't intend to. Silvanus was already moving, pulling on weapons, checking stakes and silver. Gather everyone. Full assault. I want this ended tonight, and the girl has her date Friday evening as promised, because by then there will be nothing left to threaten her. The warehouse sat empty and dark on the Baltimore waterfront, or it appeared empty. Silvanus could smell the vampires inside. 21 distinct scents, blood and age and violence. He'd brought 30 of his own, overwhelming force. This wasn't a battle he intended to fight fairly. Kane, he called, his voice carrying through the cavernous space. Let's finish this. Come out and face me. Movement in the shadows, then a figure emerged, tall, white-haired, red-eyed, but younger than Silvanus, maybe 200 years old. Kane had a cruel mouth and clever eyes. The king himself, Kane said. I'm honored. I expected you to hide your little nurse away and make me come find her. I learned from my mistakes. Silvanus stepped forward. 70 years ago I let fear make me reactive. I hid Margaret and hunted your brother separately. It didn't work. She died anyway. So this time I'm doing it differently. I'm ending you before you can touch Amara. Bold, stupid but bold. Cain gestured, and his vampires emerged from the darkness. You're outnumbered. You can't count. Silvanus snapped his fingers. His own people materialized, dropping from rafters, emerging from doorways, surrounding Cain's forces completely. 30 to 21. All older, stronger, better trained. Cain's confident expression faltered. You wanted revenge for your brother, Silvanus said coldly. You wanted to hurt me the way I hurt you. I understand that. I even respect it. But you made one critical error. You threatened someone under my protection. You made her a target, and that I cannot allow. So you'll kill me like you killed him? Pretend you're righteous? No. I'll kill you because you're dangerous, and I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. Silvanus drew a silver blade. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of letting the past poison the present. You're a loose end, Cain, and I'm done with loose ends. The battle was fast and brutal. Cain's people fought hard, but they were outmatched. Silvanus moved through them like death itself, 3 centuries of experience in every strike, no hesitation, no mercy. This was the king his enemies feared, the warrior who'd held territory through countless challenges. Theron fought beside him, and together they were unstoppable. Cain himself tried to flee, got halfway to a back exit before Silvanus caught him, slammed him against the wall hard enough to crack concrete. Margaret begged. Cain spat. Did you know that? My brother told me. She begged for her family, pleaded, cried. Silvanus drove the silver blade through his heart. And now you beg for nothing. Goodbye, Cain. He twisted the blade. Cain screamed, aged rapidly, crumbled to dust. It was done. Silvanus stood in the warehouse surrounded by ash and the bodies of vampires who'd chosen the wrong side. His hands were covered in blood and dust. His suit was ruined, but Amara was safe. Cain was dead. The threat was eliminated. Clean this up, he told Theron. Leave no trace. I have a date tomorrow, and I intend to enjoy it without constantly scanning for threats. Theron actually smiled. She's good for you. You haven't looked this alive in decades. I feel alive, Silvanus admitted. For the first time in 70 years, I feel like I might deserve something good, so I'm taking it. Friday evening arrived clear and perfect. This time Silvanus chose a restaurant, a real one, intimate and expensive, in the heart of the city. Public, visible, a statement. He was done hiding. Amara arrived in a midnight blue dress that made his undead heart race. Her curls framed her face. Her smile was sunshine. Hi, she said. Hi. He kissed her hand, no tremor this time, just warmth and certainty. You're stunning. You're not so bad yourself. She took his arm. Where are we going? Wherever you want. He led her inside the restaurant to a table by the window where anyone could see them. I'm not hiding anymore, Amara. I want the world to know I'm courting you. I want everyone to see that you're under my protection, that you matter to me. She studied his face. Something happened. You're different. I dealt with the problem. Permanently. You're safe now. Truly safe. The threat you mentioned, gone. He poured her wine. I won't bore you with the details, but it's done. No one will use you to hurt me. No one will threaten you because of what I feel. I made certain of it. Amara was quiet for a moment. You killed someone. Several someones. All of whom would have killed you without hesitation. He met her eyes. I'm not human, Amara. I'm not civilized in the way mortals are. I've ruled through strength and occasionally through violence. If that frightens you, it doesn't. She reached across the table. You protected me. You removed a threat to both of us. I'm a nurse. I understand triage. I understand that sometimes hard choices are the only choices. She squeezed his hand. Thank you for keeping me safe, for taking that weight so I didn't have to carry it. The relief that flooded through him was almost painful. You're extraordinary. I'm practical. And I'm not going to judge an immortal vampire king for living by vampire rules. That would be arrogant and stupid, she smiled. Now feed me. I've been thinking about this date all week. They ate, they talked, they laughed together over stories that spanned centuries and days. Other diners glanced at them, the impossibly beautiful pale man and the radiant woman, clearly infatuated with each other. Let them look, Silvanus thought. Let the whole city see. Let his world know their king had found something worth protecting. After dinner, they walked through the city. He kept her hand in his. Pointed out buildings he'd watched being built. Told her about the speakeasy that had occupied that corner during Prohibition. Shared history the way other men might share family stories. I want to keep seeing you, Amara said as they paused in a small park. Officially. Not just dates, but really dating. I want to introduce you to my coworkers. I want to meet your friends. I want to see where this goes. It goes wherever you want it to, Silvanus said seriously. I'm immortal. I have infinite patience. We can take this as slowly as you need. And if I don't want to go slowly? His breath caught. Then we don't. She rose on her toes and kissed him. Soft, tentative, testing. He let her lead, let her set the pace until she made a small sound and pressed closer. Then he allowed himself to respond, one hand cupping her face, the other at her waist, kissing her the way he'd wanted to since that first moment in the gallery. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she smiled against his mouth. Yeah, I don't want to go slowly, Amara. Her name was a prayer. I love you. I know it's fast. I know it's absurd, but it's true. I love you. I love you too, she said it simply, like it was obvious. How could I not? You're brave and careful and deadly and kind, and you looked at me like I was the sun. I fell so hard, Silvanus. He kissed her again and again, there in the park, under streetlights, visible to anyone passing. Claiming her and being claimed in return, it felt like freedom. Months passed. Autumn gave way to winter. Amara moved into the mansion. Her studio apartment had been absurd anyway, she argued, when he had 50 rooms sitting empty. He gave her an entire wing to decorate however she wanted. She kept working. He made sure she had a security detail that looked like nothing more than careful drivers and friendly building staff. She told her coworkers she was dating someone. They assumed he was just wealthy, not immortal. That was fine. He attended charity galas with her. She attended vampire court functions with him, representing him as a human partner, a statement of trust and progressive politics in his world. They traveled Venice because she'd never been. Tokyo because he hadn't visited in 50 years. Small trips, stolen moments. Building a life together, he learned her rhythms, the way she needed silence after hard shifts, how she processed grief by cooking elaborate meals, that she cried during animated movies but stayed composed through horror films. She learned his tells, the way his accent strengthened when he was tired, how he touched her lower back when he needed reassurance, that he still had nightmares about Margaret, about failing to protect people he loved. I'm not her, Amara said one night, holding him in their bed. I'm not a replacement or a second chance. I'm just me, and I'm here. I'm alive. You didn't fail this time. I know. He pressed his face into her hair, but sometimes the fear still catches me, that I'll wake up and you'll be gone. Then I'll keep reminding you I'm real, every day if you need it. On a Friday evening in February, exactly 6 months after their first date, Silvanus arranged dinner at the same restaurant. Amara noticed immediately. We're recreating our first date? She asked as they sat at the same table. Not recreating, completing. He reached across the table and took her hand. 6 months ago, I sat here terrified, convinced I was being reckless, sure that loving you would destroy you. And now I know that loving you is the best decision I've made in 3 centuries. That you're strong enough to stand beside me, that we protect each other. He pulled a small box from his pocket and set it between them. And now I want to know if you'll marry me. Amara stared at the box, opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was a ring, an antique ruby surrounded by diamonds, set in silver. It was my mother's, Silvanus said quietly. One of the few things I kept from my human life. I've been waiting 300 years for someone worthy of wearing it. Silvanus. Her eyes filled with tears. You don't have to answer now. I know marriage to me means complications. Politics in my world. Immortality decisions eventually. I'm not asking you to become vampire just to be my wife. To build a life together. To yes. She laughed through tears. Obviously yes, you ridiculous, wonderful man. Of course I'll marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that only trembled slightly, nervous again. But this was the good kind of nervous anticipation instead of fear. They married in spring. A small ceremony, her mother and her closest friends, his most trusted court members. Theron stood as his best man and made a surprisingly touching speech about watching his king find joy again. Amara wore white and cream, Silvanus wore black and silver. They exchanged vows in the mansion's garden at sunset when he could stand outdoors safely. I promise to love you, Amara said. In this life and whatever comes after, to stand beside you, to remind you every day that you deserve happiness, that we both deserve this. I promise to protect you, Silvanus said, not by hiding you, but by being strong enough to face threats together, to love you openly, to never let fear steal our joy, to build a life worthy of the chance you've given me. They kissed as husband and wife, and his court cheered, and it was perfect. Later, much later, after the guests had left and they were alone in their bedroom, Amara touched his face. Thank you for being brave enough to approach me. For asking me to dinner despite being terrified. Thank you for saying yes, for taking a chance on a nervous vampire king. Best decision I ever made. Years accumulated, they fell into routines, built traditions, Friday date nights always, Sunday mornings in bed talking. Monthly trips to the children's hospital together, where he funded new wings and she continued working part-time. When Amara turned 35, they had the conversation about immortality. She chose to wait, not no, but not yet. She wanted to live a full human life first, she said. He respected that. When she turned 40, she changed her mind. I want forever with you. I've had enough human life. I want our forever now. He turned her carefully, lovingly, with every safeguard vampire medicine had developed. The transition took 3 days. When she woke with red eyes and pale skin and supernatural strength, the first thing she said was, "You're still beautiful." He laughed and cried and held her. "So are you." Always. They had centuries now. Time stretched ahead like a gift. They used it well. Traveled everywhere. Built schools and hospitals. Modernized vampire law to protect humans more thoroughly. Became legends in both worlds, the king who'd learned to love again. And the nurse who'd taught him it was safe. 40 years into their marriage they adopted. A little girl, human, orphaned by a car accident, Elowen. She had dark curls like Amara's and a solemn face that broke into radiant smiles. Silvanus held his daughter for the first time and felt something click into place. Family. Real family. Not just survival or duty, but love. She's perfect, he whispered. She's ours, Amara said. Our future. They raised Elowen carefully. Let her choose her own path. She grew up knowing what her parents were, comfortable in both human and vampire worlds. Smart, brave, kind. When she was 20, she asked, will you turn me? Eventually? If you want, Amara said. But take your time. Live first. Decide who you are before you decide to be immortal. That's what you did. That's what I did, and I've never regretted waiting. Never regretted choosing this life with your father. Elowen studied them, her parents. Still so obviously in love after decades. You're disgustingly cute together. You know that, right? Silvanus smiled. I'll accept that criticism. On their 50th anniversary, Silvanus arranged dinner at the same restaurant again. It had changed owners 3 times, been renovated twice, but he'd ensured it stayed open. This place mattered. Amara sat across from him, eternally beautiful now, her eyes the same red as his, her smile still sunshine. 50 years, she said. 50 years since I asked a woman to dinner and nearly shook apart from nerves. Best nervous decision ever made, agreed. He took her hand, steady now, always steady with her. Thank you, Amara, for saying yes, for choosing me, for building this life. Thank you for being brave, for approaching me despite your fears, for trusting that love could be safe again. It was never safe, he corrected gently, but it was worth the risk. You were worth every risk. They kissed across the table, and other diners smiled at the beautiful couple so obviously in love. No one knew they were watching a 50-year marriage, a love that had survived threats and fear and the weight of immortality. No one knew the vampire king had found his queen in a gallery, had asked her to dinner with shaking hands, had rebuilt his entire world around keeping her safe and happy, but Silvanus knew, and Amara knew, and that was enough. They went home to their mansion, to their daughter, to their life. Centuries stretched ahead, full of possibility. And every Friday without fail, Silvanus took his wife to dinner, sometimes fancy restaurants, sometimes casual cafes, once memorably a food truck, but always he offered his hand, always she took it. The vampire king had been nervous once, terrified of losing love again. But he'd been brave anyway, asked anyway, loved anyway, and in return he'd gotten everything. Forever with the woman who'd smiled at him in a gallery and seen not a monster or a king but simply a man trying desperately to be worthy of her. He'd spent 300 years learning to be strong. She'd taught him that it was safe to be soft too. Together they were complete, the end.